In this video, I want to present to you a breeding map that I have created for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, alongside a breeding method that allows you to breed without Ditto. I want to present to you this breeding map in this video, as well as explaining how to use it. And so I have prepared a slideshow to just go step by step, and it includes some basics on breeding, but mostly just explaining how to use the map. And so a lot of resources that are used in this video can be found in the video description. And so let's just get right to it. The first page of the presentation is a README, and so all sources are listed in the speaker notes on each page, and then a full-size download of the breeding map is available in the video description. And although this video is advanced, the breeding guide is not comprehensive, so there is still a lot more to learn about breeding. But let's get to it. Advanced breeding for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. At first glance, this map can look quite overwhelming, but fear not. Throughout this video, we'll go through a lot of things that are related to egg groups and breeding in general. And I think by the end of this video, you'll have a really good understanding of what exactly it is that you're looking at. First, we need to have a look at Pokemon stats. And all Pokemon have 6 stats: HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed. And when you look at a Pokemon summary, this is how they show up. Now, for the final stat that actually shows in the summary, for example, you can see that speed says 147. There are multiple variables that go into it. It is level, base stats, individual values, effort values, and natures. And the combination between these 5 variables results in the stat that you see in the summary. Another thing that is relevant for this video is that Pokemon moves are categorized into 3 categories: physical attacks, special attacks, and status moves. And what's important here is that for physical attackers, they use their attack stat, and then the attack stat is calculated against the opposing Pokemon's defense stat. And in a similar way, for Pokemon that are users of special attacks, their special attack is the important one, and it goes up against the opposing Pokemon's special defense stat. Now, what are Pokemon IVs? Simply explained, IVs range from no good to best, and there's a gradient of descriptions of what the IVs are, depending on some in-game numbers. But the thing that you need to know is that the best description here is the best you can get as for IVs. Now, how to get the IV judge feature is something you can look up. Alternatively, have a look at the videos listed in the video description. But the thing here is that individual values cannot be changed once a Pokemon is hatched or caught. However, they can be hyper-trained. And hyper-trained stats will never pass down into eggs. So for example, this Pokemon right here has a special attack stat, and a speed stat that is best. If you hyper-train this Pokemon, these 3 stats will remain best, while it will show hyper-trained here. And then referring to a Pokemon as having 6 IVs means that it has 6 perfect IVs. And because most Pokemon either use its attack stat or its special attack stat, most Pokemon are only described as having 5 IVs, as you don't really count the 6th stat that is not used. We'll get back to this a little later when we go over what natures are. Oh, actually, it's right here. And so a Pokemon's nature is another variable that goes into the Pokemon stat that shows up in the summary. And a Pokemon's nature increases one stat by 10% and decreases another stat by 10% also. So for example, a physical attacker is a Pokemon that just naturally has a very high attack stat. And if it has a very high attack stat, it won't typically use its special attack. And so you can use a Pokemon's nature as a way to increase the good stat and decrease the stat that is not really relevant. So in this case, Adamant will increase attack by 10% and decrease special attack by 10% also. An important thing here when it comes to breeding is that you can artificially change a Pokemon's nature by using a nature mint, but the mints will change a Pokemon's stats, but the effect will not pass down to eggs. The mints look like this, and you can see the coloring here as, for example, mints that increase attack are red, and mints that increase defense are blue, and so on. Last thing that are interesting here are abilities. These I will go briefly over, as you'll find a description of these in most basic breeding guides. Pokemon have two categories of natures. They are either regular abilities or hidden abilities. And then depending on whether the ability is regular or hidden, it will have some different breeding mechanics here. So an example here can be Talonflame, which has Flame Body as its regular ability, and Gale Wings as its hidden ability. If you breed a Talonflame that has Flame Body, which is a regular ability, all offspring will have the regular ability also. It will never just suddenly become hidden ability. But let's say you have a Gale Wings Talonflame, which is a hidden ability, then you have a 60% chance if it is the female that has the hidden ability, or if the male has it while bred with a Ditto, then 60% of the offspring will have the hidden ability, and 40% will have the regular ability. Another thing to notice here is that Ability Capsule and Ability Patch are consumable items that will permanently change a Pokemon's ability, and this will pass down to all eggs. Let's get into the meat of this video, which is explaining egg groups. Now, what are they? All Pokemon have 1 to 2 egg groups, and this is a screenshot of Pachirisu, which is part of the Field egg group and the Fairy egg group. If 2 Pokemon share an egg group, they can breed, and the species that shows up with the offspring is determined by the female, unless it is bred with Ditto. We'll come back to some examples on this later. But how do I know which egg group a Pokemon is in? And this is something you simply have to look up in an online database like Cerebi.net, Bulbapedia, Pokemon database, and so on. And then the question is, why is 6IV male Pachirisu so useful? And that is a great question. So how can you use the breeding map? Step 1, you want to get a female Pachirisu, and you can see that here by the female icon right up here. And step 2, you want to find a few male Pokemon in the Field or Fairy egg groups. I'll show some visual examples on this later. Step 3, switch out your female Pachirisu with another female Pachirisu when you hatch one that have more best stats than your current female Pachirisu. So you just breed and get better and better Pachirisu. Repeat until you hatch a 6IV male Pachirisu. Let's go through this step by step so that everyone can understand how this breeding map works. So we can locate Pachirisu, which is here on the map. We also know that Pachirisu is a part of the Field egg group and the Fairy egg group. Any Pokemon that is either in the Field egg group or in the Fairy egg group can be bred with Pachirisu. Another thing to notice here is something called base egg steps, which is the number of steps that you have to walk with an egg in your party for it to hatch. Pachirisu, among all the Pokemon here that are in the Field egg group, Pachirisu has the lowest base egg steps, and that is why we're choosing to start off with Pachirisu. Now, let's sample a couple of Pokemon. We have Raichu here, which is in the Field Fairy egg group, and so if you find a male Raichu from a wild TERA encounter, then you can use it. Let's see, what about Lucario? It is in the Field and the Human-like egg group. You can also find it as a wild TERA Pokemon. How about Weasel? It's in the Field Water 1 egg group. It's also a wild TERA Pokemon. And the significance with a wild TERA Pokemon is that they have a guaranteed 2 to 3 perfect IVs, which is the best. And then another Pokemon that we can tie on here to just stress an example is Breloom, which is Fairy and grass. And so because Breloom is in the fairy egg group, we can breed it with Pachirisu. We could also breed it with Raichu, but let's not get carried away here. Step by step, you have a Pachirisu that has 0 IVs, and it is female. Now, you can choose freely the males of these species. You have a male Weasel, Raichu, Breloom, and Lucario, and you can switch around these males that have various IVs and breed them with the female 0 IV Pachirisu that is female. And then eventually you'll hatch a couple eggs and they will show up with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 IVs. But you have to switch out the Pachirisu every time you get a Pachirisu that is better or has more stats that are best. And so the result here is that you breed the 0 IV female Pachirisu with a bunch of these and just get better and better stats on the Pachirisu until you get a 4 to 5 IV female. And eventually you will be lucky enough to end up with a 6 IV male Pachirisu. Now, what is the significance of the 6 IV male Pachirisu? I'm going to show you here back on the map. So if you are able to hatch a male Pachirisu that is 6 IV, you have covered 2 egg groups with a perfect Ditto substitution. So you have field and fairy. That means that every single Pokemon that is female, that is in the fairy or the field egg group, can be bred using that 6 IV male Pachirisu. And what's interesting here is that you can actually bring the male Pachirisu into getting access to the dragon egg group by breeding a male Pachirisu with a female Sandaconda. You can also get access to the grass egg group by bringing your male Pachirisu and breeding it with a female Sprigatito. And you can do this for all the different egg groups here that are connected to Pachirisu with this color as you see. And so once you're done here, you can then choose another egg group to expand to. You can see that the Buizel here is part field and water 1. Now, the step-by-step guide here is you have your male Pachirisu that have 6 perfect IVs, and then you have your Buizel that is female and potentially has up to 2 or 3 depending on when you catch it in the wild, but let's just assume it has 0 IVs. Then you have your 6 IV male Pachirisu that is field fairy, and you have the 0 IVs on the female Buizel. You keep on breeding these and switching out the female when you get a female that has more than 0 IVs and better and better and better. And at some point, you're going to be lucky and get a 6 IV male Buizel. Now, the consequence of that is that you now have 2 entry points. You have covered the field egg group both in the 6 IV male Buizel and in the 6 IV male Pachirisu. And through these Pokemon, you also have access to the fairy and now the water 1 egg group. And then you can expand from Buizel and do the same thing either into the bug or the amorphous or the water 3 egg group. Let's use an example here with Gastrodon just to drive this point home. Here we go. So your male 6 IV Buizel is in the field water 1 egg group. You can breed it with the Gastrodon here, which is water 1 amorphous. You find a female 0 IV or however high you find it. You breed the Buizel with a female Gastrodon, and you keep going until you get a better and better female Gastrodon until you're in the 4 to 5 IV range. And then at some point you're going to be lucky and have a 6 IV male Gastrodon. And at this point, you've covered field fairy plus water 1 plus amorphous. And this is your breeding chart so far. So you have 3 egg groups that you have expanded to. in addition to the starting field. So you have field, fairy, water 1, amorphous, which is 4 in total. And the interesting thing here with the map is once you get Pachirisu, male, 6 IV, it is up to you where you want to go. And you can expand into grass if you want, you can go to dragon. And the important thing to note here is you can choose if you just want to cover field, fairy, and then mineral, and just quit and find the other Pokemon from raids and whatnot. But typically with hidden abilities, it is really good to breed. And so there is some utility in this map, even though we will have access to some really good Dittos in a couple weeks / months. Some other details when it comes to breeding is that first and foremost, when you want to pass down the nature, it is the Pokemon that holds this item, the Everstone, that will pass down its nature to all the eggs. So if we go back a little bit here into the Weasel example here with the Gastrodon, if the Weasel has a nature that you want it to pass down into all the Gastrodon eggs, you need to give the Weasel the Everstone. The Destiny Nut can be given to any of the parents, and so any parent Pokemon can hold this. The effect will be the same. 5 of the parent stats will be passed down to all eggs, and the 6th stat is random. And so this is quite convenient, as typically you just go for 5 IV Pokemon, as physical or special attackers have one stat they don't need, and so you don't need that to be perfect. And a change here with Generation 9 is the Mirror Herb item, and the Pokemon that holds this item can learn any available egg move from a different Pokemon, a different species entirely, if it holds a Mirror Herb and has an empty move slot. Useful abilities while breeding can be Flame Body, Steam Engine, and Magma Armor. They all have the same effect, which is if the Pokemon in the first spot in your party has one of these abilities, your eggs will hatch twice as fast. So if the base egg rate is 2,560, it will be reduced down to 1,280, which is pretty nice. Synchronize is another great ability. If the Pokemon in the first spot in your party has this ability, Pokemon you encounter in the wild will have the same nature when caught. And a tip here in Scarlet and Violet, just fly to a Pokemon Center and reset it after you've put a synchronized Pokemon in the first spot in your party. The Masuda method, another thing at the end here. The thing here with the Masuda method is that you can breed 2 different Pokemon that are caught in save files that are played in different languages. It's not based on countries, but languages. And so native Pokemon, Pokemon caught in your native language, which is the language you chose when you started the game, and they will not display a language icon. Once a save file is created, you cannot change the language. And foreign Pokemon is then all the other languages that you could have chosen, but that you're not playing in. And Pokemon caught in a language different from your native language will display a language icon in their summary. And so an example here can be if you play in English and receive a Japanese Pokemon, the Japanese Pokemon will display the 3 letters JPN in its summary. And if you breed a Pokemon from your save file, which is, or rather a Pokemon with your native language and a Pokemon that is of a different language, then the odds of hatching a shiny Pokemon is greatly increased. Another thing to add at the end here are that there are a few Pokemon that cannot be bred using the chart, and they are genderless Pokemon. These can only be bred with Ditto. And I will show you a little later here with a calculator that is really handy to use when figuring out what the odds are to hatch some of these. As you can actually get a really good chain going with just a 3 IV Ditto. And so these Pokemon need to be bred with Ditto, and these Pokemon as well, as they are male only. I think this is the last part of the video, and this is an essential tool if you want to be an advanced breeder. It is linked in the video description, and it is incredible. Essentially, you just click off the stats that are best of a parent, and then you click for the other parent, and then you want to type in your goal here. An example here can be you have one Pokemon that have these stats best, and you have another Pokemon that have these stats best, but your goal is to have a 5 IV physical attacker, as the special attack stat does not matter. Based on this calculator, on average, you need to hatch 39 eggs. And then we can take a look at some more statistics that show up on the same page. You can see here that it is a 2% chance to hatch a 5 IV. There's a 43% chance to hatch a 3 IV. Another example here can be if you have 2 6 IV Pokemon, let's say you have a 6 IV female Pachirisu and a 6 IV male Pachirisu, the odds of getting a 5 IV Pachirisu is incredible. You can see here, 1 in 5 to 6 eggs, you'll pump out 5 IV Pokemon. And especially if you have hidden abilities, which is something you can add on here, then the odds will be a little bit worse. But you can like pump out hidden ability 5 IV Pokemon within 10 to 15 eggs on average and trade them to your friends. The other thing to note here is that if you have 2 parents that have 6 IVs, there's no chance of getting 4 IVs. The reason for this is because the Destiny Knot will pass down 5 of these 12 available stats, and the last one will be a wild card. And so it'll randomly choose, this time we will just assign a random number here, and then we'll choose one of these, and so on. This is something you can potentially ask me in a breeding live stream, as I actively will use this calculator. Another example here is to just remove the perfect stats here so that you have 2 perfect parents that are physical attackers and you just want to breed more offspring that are 5 IV. The odds are exactly the same, except you can see here that you more explicitly see the 4 IV here in the calculator. The odds are exactly the same, it's just counted different, because now it never counts this as a failure. And so the adventure continues. I have listed a bunch of videos in the video description as well as in this slideshow that you can take a look at. And you can also comment down below if something was unclear and I'll get back to you. I hope this video was helpful and that the breeding map can help you in your breeding adventures. And thank you for watching.